Julian Hince, an extremely warm welcome to the Humans versus Retirement podcast.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks very much.
Julian, it's lovely to have you on. This is a slightly different episode. I've recorded a couple of these before, in that you are an actual person that's actually retired, which I love talking about this stuff, obviously, but the bulk of my conversations have been with experts and authors and people that are writing about all of the elements of retirement. But I do think that it's even more noteworthy to speak to someone like yourself who has very, very recently retired. And when I say very recently, we're not even talking in months, are we? It's weeks.
Weeks.
And the journey that you've had leading up to it. So, as full disclosure, I've worked with Julian for the last couple of years on his retirement, and I think his story, what he's worked on, what he's been through, is really, really important for you guys listening to understand. So I'm thrilled to have Julian on and thrilled that he's agreed to be open and honest and a bit vulnerable about his journey, because I think he will teach a lot of people a lot of things. So thank you, Julian, for coming on.
No problem.
So I think it's really worth starting, not necessarily at the beginning. I don't need to go back to childhood, although we've done a bit of that with some of the stuff that we've talked about. But just your career is a really important one for people to understand, in that you've grown up in financial services, right? In terms of as a career. Yeah. So if you can explain to everybody where you've been and what you've done and kind of what led you to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. You're absolutely right. I've spent the last 38 and a half years working within financial services in various roles, most notably within investment management, but most importantly, facing off to financial planners, so to the financial advice marketplace. So I've been sort of well aware and well exposed, if you like, to the role of a financial planner, financial services, what it's designed to do, etc. But it's a bit like one of those stories that you read about somebody else. So it was never about me. I was never a client. I was never involved in it for let's face it, nearly 40 years, until I reached out to you when I realized that I was getting to that sort of stage and mindset and age, and I realized that I needed some help.
I want to talk about that moment that you reached out, actually, because I think it was, and we've talked about this before, I think it was a very brave moment that, in terms of reaching out, and particularly working in the industry and the profession that you have done. I think a lot of people, and I work with a lot of people in investment management, asset management, etc. There is probably a sense that I should be able to do this myself, and and I know kind of this stuff. I've been exposed to this stuff. Talk to me about the mindset that you had around that when you realised kind of retirement could be on the cards. I want to think about it, but I kind of need a bit of help, maybe. But and how you thought, did you think I could do this myself, and I should be able to do this myself, and maybe you had a bit of I don't know, some psychological hurdles to kind of get over in terms of thinking about, reaching out for help?
Yeah, it's a good question. I didn't have any reservations about reaching out for help because, and I'm a qualified advisor, as I say, I've been involved in this, but for a long, long time, but specifically within investment management. And financial services, as you know, is a broad church. So when it comes to investment management, I feel more comfortable and perhaps would adopt a DIY approach. But planning for your retirement is a totally different ballgame. I had no idea whether I had enough, whether it was possible, where to go to, what my drawdown facility would look like, what the options are. I genuinely didn't know. I've passed an exam paper, but that told me probably more about pensions regulation in 1868 than it does how to actually do this stuff. So I didn't have any reservations. And the reason I reached out to you was because you sort of set your stall out saying, I'm somebody that can work with somebody like you. It spoke to me. So it wasn't that sort of holistic, come and have a chat about financial planning. It was, if you're thinking about retirement, I can help you. And at that point, that's exactly what I was doing. So it spoke to me. So I didn't have any issues about reaching out.
Do you think people do have issues, like your experience working with other colleagues, etc.? Do you think there is a sense that this retirement thing is a bit easier than what it is. I want to ask you some questions about the journey in a second, but
Yeah.
this should be a pretty easy thing to do. I know how to manage my money.
Yeah.
And I think people underestimate, and I'm sure we're going to get into this because I know we've had several conversations and done a lot of work on it, but underestimate all of the non-financial elements that retirement kind of brings. Do you think that's that is out there, like that reservation to kind of go, well, actually, I don't need much help and I'll be able to do this myself?
I think so, to a degree. And I think there's a lot of ignorance in the nicest possible sense around two things. One, the financial aspects. The reaction I've had from my network is, gosh, how have you managed that? You're very young. And that's from people older than me and who've probably earned a lot more money than me. So I think there's a misconception about how much financially you need in a pot. But the biggest wake-up call, and if people are listening to this, the one thing I would urge them to take away from this is the emotional side of preparing for this, thinking about retirement. That pre-act and post-retirement phase is not to be underestimated. And I think, my friends and network are probably getting bored of me saying it. I never talk about the money. It's the money, not it's irrelevant, but that's not the bit I'm asking them to really think about. So anybody that is considering this, I would equalize that in terms of, the sort of emotional side with the financial side. And that's where I think, again, good financial planning without blowing smoke up you, Dan, it's not just about prepping someone from the financial side. It's about, have you actually thought about what you're going to do? What's your purpose, your structure? What is it? What does retirement look like? Perhaps things that we don't think about a great deal. I think, maybe over a beer with, colleagues and all the rest of it, can't wait to get out of all of this and, go and do X, Y, and Z. But do we really think about it? A lot of it is a bit of a fantasy, isn't it? Sailing around the world, cruises, going to the Masters, whatever it might be. These are all bucket list things, but it's not every day. There are 365 days of the year to not get through, but to think about and plan for, and that's so important. And it's been my biggest wake up call, that's for sure.
You can blow smoke. I'm not. It's fine. It's just nice. It's nice to hear. No, I'm joking. I think actually it's really. I want to go back to a couple of points actually without divulging personal information as such. I think it's relevant around your age. It's relevant around your the amount of money that you had and have without delving into it. For a couple of reasons, really. I think so many people have this preset idea that they need millions at age 65, right? That's kind of this. And I'm not saying that you had that preset idea, but I very much know through the conversations we had and the work we did, you did feel like, one, you were too young, and two, you didn't have enough, right? That's kind of the feeling but you ultimately wanted to get out of the industry for a whole host of reasons. And when we first met, you had a countdown clock on your phone, which incidentally, actually, we got out before the countdown clock expired, didn't you? So, I mean, that's that.
I've still got it to remind me how early I did it. So
yeah. So we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
I mean, talk to me a bit about that. This notion that you've probably heard working in an industry where money dominates, ego dominates. It's about more, not necessarily enough. Tell me your thoughts around that.
Yeah. Again, I think it comes down to a lack of education. There's my generation, so mid-50s, have grown up with parents who have probably been on final salary schemes, whose journey into retirement looked very different, but that's all we've ever had to learn from. And so I think that became our benchmark, and we assumed, because we no longer have final salary schemes, that actually to have that equivalent sort of retirement, we're going to need a huge pot of money. And you're right, we're lucky we've worked in a profession where earnings are above average. People can do reasonably well. And so I think you're surrounded by maybe individuals whose lifestyle expectations, ambitions are slightly out of the norm, funnily enough.
Mm.
And it goes back to that, what is it that you want out of retirement? And we never really think about what is enough. I can't think of one conversation with any of my colleagues in financial services about how much is enough. I really can't. I think it was just more and more and more, just keep accumulating. But actually, the truth is, none of us really knew. You'd get, of course, we all receive the sort of annual. We used to get the annual. This is what your pension is worth, and I used to, and actually they used to make put my head in my hands when I read those, because let's say you had £500,000 in a pot. So you could have £7,000 a year in retirement. You think, oh, this is never going to happen. And I used to have that conversation with my parents lots. My mum said, oh, why don't you think about retiring? I said, there's no way, Mum, there's no way I can afford to retire. No way. And that's because I didn't know what I was talking about, is the honest truth. And I realise it's a bit like anybody looking for some help in any walk of life. You have to realise there's a problem and then want to reach out to solve it. And it was a problem. So I think there's a huge amount of misinformation and also a lack of conversation around that. Also, we work in an industry where, funny enough, people of my sort of age start to disappear, and we never really have a conversation. They just disappear. And so I think it dawned on me that I was getting to that point where I suddenly become, my last role, I was the second oldest person in the whole company, and I thought, right,
yeah,
there might not be a plan B here. I need to plan for an exit. Yeah. So. Yeah, I can't speak for other professions and how other people talk about it, but I suspect it's not that different, really.
No. Well, I think you surround yourself with a network of people, whether they're kind of socially friends or kind of work colleagues, and you often strive and look at the people that are above or doing the thing, and it's and the chase is often a journey that really dominates, right? The chase dominates, not the kind of actually the real core work about understanding who you are, what you want to do, how you want to do it, who you want to spend your time with. And my observation is that two things really. One, it's a bloody hard thing to do, to actually look inside yourself and do this work. And because it's bloody hard, people don't do it, right? So, the easy answer is just to keep going and keep accumulating. But I honestly, I think you are, your journey is one that I think is typical for people that I work with and we work with, in that when you start looking inward, the amount of money you need is less and the time that you need to work is less. Because actually what truly matters, where you want to spend your time, how much you're going to spend, is more often than not a lot less than what people believe they need in order to live their life that they want. And I think it's that trap that people get into. And there's numerous studies around, right? When people go, how much is enough? It's pretty much, no matter what your wealth is double. If you've got £1 million, it's 2. If you've got 2, it's 4. It's like, there's no science behind this. The human behavior will not allow itself to look inwardly without a bit of hard work. So I think you're absolutely right. And one thing I do want to bring up, and one thing I hugely loved about working with you and really respected about what you were trying to do, or what you have done actually and achieved, is you set your stall out pretty early on. When we first sat down and you realized that with a bit of hard work and heavy lifting on your side, this thing could be a possibility, then you decided to get on with it, right? You made some sacrifices. You started saving a bit more to get to a target. You downgraded kind of your stuff, which I think is quite interesting, right? We were talking about material objects that you had, that you hang on to, that you realized that you didn't really need and you could let go of to put some more money into the pot to allow that hard work that you did, made it all possible when you got presented with an opportunity to exit. What are we, 6 months early than you thought?
Yeah, 6 months earlier.
You were able to say yes to that. So talk to me about that process, kind of that, the mindset you went through, and maybe how you thought, do you know what, this is a reality and I need to take action to make this happen.
Yeah, it's been such a crucial part of this. And the reason I did that, sold things and started saving more, was quite simple. It's because I engaged with you and the process, and what that did was crystallize things. Number one, it made me realize this was possible. You made me realize this is achievable. You can do this. But what we need to do in order to get there is maybe X, Y, Z. And it was down to me to do that, to make that happen. It depends how much you want things in life, doesn't it?
Exactly.
And so, I sold my car. I bought a cheaper car. I sold my watch. I sold all those trinkets that we used to hold in really high regard and were highly valued, especially in our industry. Everyone watching out for what car you were pulling up in at the latest conference and all the rest of it. You sort of grow out of that a little bit, don't you? Realise what's important and what isn't. So for me, those trinkets weren't important. What was important was that freedom, time, etc., and setting my own agenda. So that really, really focused my attention. And then those constant check-ins with you and the team. The team at TFP have been fantastic at communicating with me, responding to queries that I've had along the way. And also, as you know, Dan, one of the other things it did was prompt me to actually read some of the things that came through my post. And two things that came through the post in the last 18 months were old final salary schemes that I had, which I'd forgotten about. Let's be honest, I'd forgotten about it. So what it prompted me to do is say, oh, actually, what is this? I need to, investigate. This might be something, it might be nothing. And actually two of them turned out to be something. But without that focus and that mindset on this single goal, I still wouldn't have bothered to really look into them. It's just another, leaflet through the post. So I would encourage anybody to understand that this is possible. Engage with a professional, and if you want it enough, you'll make it happen. You will absolutely make it happen. And already within 2 months of not working, you're absolutely right. I haven't spent as much money already as I normally do because I'm more content, maybe, I don't know, pottering around a little bit more, not out and about quite as much. So already that's been interesting. Early days, of course, but I'm sure I'll warm up to it as we work our way through. Yeah, it's been an intense focus process. And it feels to me like it's been two parties coming together to make this happen.
I love that. I want to get back to spending money. So I've made a note, and I'm going to come back to it because I think it's really interesting. A couple of observations for me, right? There's been numerous kind of, and I'm a big softie at heart, right? There's been numerous like heartwarming moments that I've had when working with you. And one of them was the email that you sent me to go, Dan, I found this pension, don't know what it is, can we have a look at it? And realizing it was something. There was another one when I think about 6 weeks later, I think you must have copy and pasted the same email because you were just like, I found this other thing's come through the post. So they were brilliant, right? Because it's like, well, when I know that the person on the other end, i.e. you, the person I'm working with, is as engaged in this and passionate about their life, which sounds ridiculous, right? But there are people that I have worked with where I feel like I'm more engaged and more passionate about their life than they are. And so, as you said, you're focused, you're on it, you're getting this stuff through, you're taking an interest, you know what's going on. And they were two great moments because as soon as I saw the paperwork, I'm like, this actually is a material difference to your long-term financial situation. And one of the other moments, and without going into too much detail about money, when you come in and you went, I've sold my watch, and this was a moment that filled you with joy and contentment. The selling of the thing felt like you were, and they talk about decluttering, right? There's a whole load of work on making sure your life is as decluttered as possible, this minimalism movement that's out there. And I'm not saying you've kind of done that necessarily, although we have talked about you clearing out, stuff and a bit. But this moment you come in, the happiness and joy on your face that you had sold something that you no longer valued to give you something you were working towards and you really valued, I could see behind the eyes what that meant, which I think's a huge takeaway for anyone listening in terms of getting rid of stuff in order to achieve stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the value of that watch, and I'd had it for a long time, but the value of that watch existed with everybody else, if you like. My kids would often ask me, who are you going to leave that to, and all the rest of it, and the answer was none of you.
Yep.
But it didn't hold the same value to me, but the value of that trinket, if you like, and selling my car remains with me. Because the value of that is that I'm sat here now on what I don't even know what day it is. Brilliant. Tuesday morning.
Yep.
Not working. and talking to you.
I don't know what day it is. That's so cool. Who cares, right? Every day's an adventure. Who cares?
Yeah.
That's brilliant. So I'm really intrigued. If you can come up with one thing, that'd be amazing. You might not be able to come up with one thing. What has surprised you the most over the last? Let's say every question I ask you from now on, roughly, we're talking about the last year, right? This
Yeah.
kind of
Okay.
because a year ago, I don't think you thought you would be in this position, right? So, what has surprised you the most over the last 12 months?
Okay. How emotionally difficult it's been at times, and what a roller coaster it's been. Actually, that's what surprised me.
I think it's. I don't. I think that would be a typical answer. I
Yeah.
really.
Do you? Right. That's it. That's
Yeah.
interesting because I think
I do. Yeah, because I think there's so much focus on the money, and when you start actually, I suppose what I've observed is when I take the money away from the focus and people go, I've got this other thing's really like that those are challenging thoughts and plans to put in place. Tell me more about that then. What do you think is from that emotional aspect? Is there one thing emotionally that's kind of sat with you or struck a chord?
I think it's going to be very stereotypical to a degree, but I think it's because it's true. Is that it's that loss of sense of what you've been for nearly 40 years, and then finding a structure, a sense of purpose, a reason to be. What am I going to do today?
Yeah.
And when you're working, you often don't have to think about that too much. You know, set the alarm, get up, switch your laptop on, work. You have to think about it. And it's a real first world problem, right? I'm not expecting anyone to feel sorry for me, but it's something that you mustn't take lightly. I was surprised at the emotional impact. You know, I probably went through a stage where it worried me, it frightened me. I didn't sleep very well. Is this the right? What am I going to do? Am I going to have enough money? Am I going to be able to do this and that and the other? And and you start catastrophizing everything, and then I've definitely come through the other side of that now already, and I'm sure I'll have my moments. I'm sure I will still.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's been the emotional impact more than anything else. And everything I've read, and I've done a lot of prep. You've pointed me in the direction of a lot of literature and what have you to read about planning for this. And I have done a lot of the work that you send out, done all of that. So I have really thought about this and tried to plan for it. But even so, I'm still a human being and with emotions. And it's been tricky at times.
Yeah. No, look, I think, and the danger that I think people fall into, they feel like it's a one and done exercise. It's like, I do this retirement thing, I'll figure out who I want to be and what I want to do, and I'm good, right? I mean, no, that's not what human nature's about. As you rightly said, this is an ongoing journey, different iterations, different times, different emotions. And, it's a bit. I mean, I play a lot of golf, right? I mean, I played at the weekend. I played 2 weekends ago, and I played amazingly well. Played this weekend, felt like I'd done nothing different. I felt like I'd back to being a beginner again, right? It's kind of like once you feel like you've cracked something, it comes back and bites you.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case with this, right? For me, people that have the best time in retirement understand that it's an ongoing journey where emotions will be heightened at certain points. You'll have weeks where you feel like you've cracked it, and you'll have weeks and days and maybe months where you feel like, what the hell am I doing, right? But I do believe that if you have the foundations right and you can have something to refer back to, people to talk to and understand, then you can kind of navigate yourself through it.
I think that's right, because earlier on we spoke about the conversations that we might have had with peer group and all the rest of it around retirement. And we've all had that, well, if I won the lottery, wouldn't it be brilliant? Or, to be able to ring up and say, I'm not coming back in again. And perhaps the only conversation we've ever had about retirement is just think next Monday, that first day of not having to go to work, how good that will feel. So we focus on that initial first day, ringing up your boss, telling you you're not coming in, that first morning of not having to go to work. Well, guess what? Fingers crossed, I might have another 20, 25 years of not having
first mornings. Yeah.
First morning. So you need to think more than just that first one.
And I think that's why a lot of the episodes on the podcast, a lot of work I do with people, focuses on, and you mentioned these two things really, I do think the foundations to human life are happiness and joy, particularly in the second half of our life, is identity and purpose. And you've rightly said, and I use a bit more of a harsher phrase, but I mean, we are spoon-fed, whether we want it and we like it, we are spoon-fed our identity and purpose for a large chunk of our lives, right? For a 20, 30-year period, I think, you, Julian, have been spoon-fed your identity and purpose. And so when that spoon has been taken away, and by the way, now you've got to figure this stuff out by yourself, that's so challenging to unwind 20, 30, in your case, longer, years of, as you said, having this thing kind of on a plate for you to go, well, actually, what are the bits that I liked? What are the bits that I didn't? And what have I always wanted to get to? Look, I mean, you can't underestimate what that particular journey goes through. And then you're not just doing that in isolation, you're doing that under the cloud of one of the most emotive subjects that human beings face in money, right? I mean, that's kind of, you're trying to figure out an identity and purpose whilst also worrying about whether you've got enough to even live for the next 20, 30 years for a lot of people. So I think that's, to me, that's a really interesting observation from you.
And do you know what's interesting about that as well is that we don't talk about money really in our culture. Nobody, even my best friends, nobody said, well, how much have you got then? Because is it possible for me to do what you've done? Nobody has asked me. Nobody.
No, taboo. I mean, and absolutely correct. And I don't know why we don't. And to be fair, look, on this podcast, I've even said, like, well, we won't talk about the numbers, right? I'm scared to share your numbers with people.
Yeah,
I know it's your numbers, right?
Yeah.
But I think, again, if someone doesn't go, oh, by the way, I've retired wonderfully well because I've figured out all my stuff and I only had £500,000 in the bank and it's possible. How do other people not know that it's, the trouble is because it's all this hearsay, because it's this cloak and daggers, because it's shrouded in secrecy, everybody believes it needs to be £1.5 million.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
I'm telling you now, that it absolutely does. And for the large majority of my clients, they don't have that and they don't need it. And even if they've got more than it, which a big chunk do, then they're not going to get through it because they don't need that amount of money. They've worked too long and saved too much for what they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to say the numbers here, but if anybody wants to reach out to me and have a chat, then they're more than welcome because you might be surprised.
Yeah. No, I agree. Absolutely. And it comes back to the bit you said about the money, right? I think, our parents and grandparents, the blueprint or the people that we could go to and think, well, how, what did they have? And where is the most open conversation? Where can I look through the window with those people? Well, their retirements are fundamentally different. I mean, they're so different, they're not even worth looking at. Right?
No, completely different. Yeah.
And so, we're now at a point where people are going alone in a way that they don't have the same amount of defined benefits. That there is no, pensions don't really exist anymore. You've now got a pot of money that's designated for your retirement that's invested and you have to draw down. That's a totally different experience to what they had. So,
well, it is. And we haven't had a generation properly to go through that, my generation, our generation, will become the benchmark for the next generation because probably the pension system will be the same, of DC schemes, etc. So, in many ways, we don't have a lot of experience to draw on under this new system.
No. Wonderful, Julian. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's so valuable. Is there anything that you could share with and you may have already touched on this, but let's try and frame it succinctly. Anything that you've learned that you would like to share? Maybe one thing that you feel like you've learned through this process.
I'll give you two things. One, you might be surprised at how much is enough, and I'm talking about financially. Two, don't be afraid to engage with a professional. Without you and your support, I would not be sat here today. So do not be afraid. The value in proper financial advice far exceeds any fees you might have to pay, without a shadow of a doubt. And three, don't underestimate the emotional impact. I know you asked for one. Three, don't underestimate the emotional impact. Plan this properly. It's exciting. If we were out having a drink saying, right, let's plan a life without work. How exciting is that? So it is exciting, but don't be surprised if you wake up with the cold sweats in the middle of the night now and again.
Yeah.
But it's okay. It'll be okay.
Absolutely. Staying on that excitement thread, then, what are you most looking forward to over the next 12 months?
Yeah, lots. I think I said to you fairly recently, one of the most exciting things, and it's a really small thing, is I can plan things without thinking, how's that going to impact on my annual holiday entitlement, right? I don't need to book days off anymore. Wow. It's silly, but it's transformational. So, for instance, I text my middle daughter this morning, and I'm going to take my grandson to the Sea Life Centre next Wednesday. I don't have to think about it, right? Hurrah! Little things.
Actually, Julian, let me quickly stop you there, right? Sorry, I don't normally interrupt.
That's right.
That is not a little thing.
No.
Right? That's a big thing.
Yeah, it is a big thing.
And I think we need to reframe this, right? Like spending a day with your grandson, taking him to experience something with you is one of the biggest things you could do.
Yeah,
so the freedom has allowed you to do it. And I think if we start thinking, I hear that all the time, right? I can do these little things. They're not little things.
Yeah, you're right.
These are big things.
Yeah.
And they're the reason why you worked hard and you've brought your family up and you've got this opportunity now to go and do that, right?
Yeah,
these are the reasons why. These are the big things.
Yeah, they are. You're absolutely right. And I'm going to pick up my granddaughter from school and things like that, and spend a bit more time with them. My eldest daughter gets married this year, so I can spend time getting ready for that and traveling there and enjoying those moments. I've set up a garden maintenance business. My passion is gardening, so I've got an advert going out next month in the local rag saying I've called myself the retired gardener, and I'll only take on a few clients, but without sort of going back on what you've just said, it's those little things. I'm not interested in bungee jumping off the Empire State Building. I don't want to dive over Niagara Falls or anything like that. I'm happy living my life, but under my terms. So nothing much more exciting than that, really. Family, friends, and my partner, all of those good things.
I love that. By the way, that's the first time I've heard that Julian is going to be called the retired gardener, and he's put an advert out. So that's a neat. And I mean, we've had no prep for this as well, right? I just want to say that. So we're in and straight talking. So this is wonderful. And can I please be a client, because I need my garden doing?
Yes,
so we need to. But can I be one of the 5 or 10 that you have?
Yes, exactly.
So I think it's wonderful, right? I've got so much to say on that, and I think you're right. I suppose what I want to do is frame this in a way that it's little. When I say it's like little things or big things, right? It's little in terms of, how can I phrase this? Little in terms of the thing, but big in terms of impact, right? Like you said, this is not bungee jumping, world cruise. This is not kind of, and actually just thinking out loud here, I think that is what we should all do. I think big things, little impact is what a lot of people end up doing. Kind of, I'm going to go and do this massive thing here, and it's a one-off, like, high dopamine hit of rush, and it has little lasting impact on what they truly value. Whereas I would encourage everybody to do what you're doing. It's kind of, actually, it might be little things, but it's a big, long-lasting impact, both emotionally and mentally, and all of that stuff that you value, right? So little in terms of picking your granddaughter up, little in terms of going to the Sea Life Centre, but massive in terms of impact that you're going to kind of have personally.
Yeah. And it's about memories. One of the reasons I picked up the phone to you in the first place, I think your strapline on LinkedIn, I think it was, enabling people to make memories. Was it something along those lines, wasn't it? And that's what this process is about. It's not about drawdown and money and all the rest of it. It is about the bigger picture, creating those memories. We're not around forever. We've all experienced people that didn't make it. Life can be a bit of a lottery in that sense, and then whenever that happens to us, funny enough, it happened last week. Is that right? Life's too short, going to make it count and all the rest of it, and then life gets in the way, doesn't it? So actually got to really live that.
Yeah. And like you said, without kind of suggesting that everybody needs to work with me or another retirement planner or financial planner, this is not that. This is saying I think everybody needs someone to be accountable to. I think, when it comes to this stuff, it's very, very hard. I think very few people do it alone. Very few people can act because we get in our own way, don't we, with this stuff, right?
Yeah,
That's why I look at who I work with. I work with a number of people that are professional investment managers, and we are running their retirement money because they've come to the realization that they're their own worst enemy when it comes to their own money or their own life. And I think it's the same. It's why Tony Robbins commands massive fees and has hundreds of thousands of people go and listen to him. People need this accountability to be able to go, do you know what? This is really challenging for me to figure this out by myself, number one.
yes,
And
yeah,
really challenging, number two, to stay on track. Because
yes,
things in a modern world, it's so easy and to kind of get caught up in the noise. And just as you said, you have these events, friends and family end up passing away early. It gives you a short-term kick up the backside to go, life's
yeah.
too short. And then how many people just get back into the old way within
Well, we
2
all do.
weeks,
We all do.
right? I mean, and in reality, a lot of those things should give us the permanent kick up the backside that we need. But we human beings, I've kind of, we fail in that environment, and we need people to be able to kind of help us along the journey.
We do. It's not just that, because we're human. It feels like you're not on your own doing it as well.
Exactly. Tribe.
Yeah, it really does. It really feels that. And I've just looked in the background and my 10-year-old daughter put that card together for me at the weekend because my family hosted a surprise retirement dinner for me. And my 10-year-old made this card, and it shows you what matters to them to a degree. That character in the middle is her. That's me, apparently. So my 10-year-old daughter's literally twice the size of me, so she needs an art lesson. Point is, we're on an allotment, because I've told her I've applied for an allotment. I used to have an allotment, and that's her eating gooseberries that I've made on the allotment. That's what matters to her.
Absolutely.
So, we go back to those small things, but that would be a big thing. If I can make that happen, I'll remind her of that card. And that what a brilliant thing to do.
Amazing, honestly. So, and actually, one key point I want everyone to understand that this is not just your retirement journey, right? This is, I'm not saying you, but this is everybody around you's retirement journey, right? It's your partner, your spouse, your children's, your grandchildren's, your friends, your close work. Unfortunately, it's everybody's, because everybody will be impacted differently, both potentially positively and negatively. And I think it's everybody's retirement journey, right? For your daughter, it's like, well, actually, Dad's about, and we can kind of go and do this thing together. And that's how it's impacted her. I think we need to start to realize that it is a personal thing, but it impacts so many other people. And if you get that bit right, you can have such a positive kind of immediate circle around you that is supportive. It's your purpose, it's your why, it's your reason for doing stuff. And I think that's so impactful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
The retired. I want to go back to the retired gardener. I think it's just wonderful. And we've talked a lot about your passion for gardening, right? And how you feel, or you felt, that would be something you would absolutely do. You personally do a lot more, and we've talked about the allotment before, and you want to get that, and you.
Yeah.
But actually, it comes back to finding something that you would give back to, right? We know that work gives us purpose and structure. As long as we're working on our terms and doing the things that we want to do, you might not even class going round and cutting people's lawns as work, and shaping their garden and helping them grow stuff. But it will give you a lot of the kind of feelings that work has provided, the good stuff. I just think it's a true testament of how people should look at aligning their passions, what they love to do, with actually something they can give back to other people. Now, look, if you earn some money from it, great, which you're going to, because you've turned it into something that you can kind of do and earn a bit of money.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a lot of research out there that getting paid fairly for doing a job actually makes us happy. That's what should happen. Talk to me about your mind, just about that journey when you went, do you know what, I'm gonna put an advert in the local newspaper and I'm gonna go out and do this thing. What was there triggers? Was there a thing? Was there something that?
Yeah, there was actually, and it is about giving back. Funnily enough, because I am passionate about my garden, I recognise that so are a lot of other people who may not physically be able to maintain their gardens anymore. We've got an elderly population. I pop down to my local coffee shop most days, and I sit there, and I'm the youngest probably by about 15, 20 years. And a lot of these people are sat there on their own. And I went over to an old boy last week and had a chat with him, and he just seemed really, I know it sounds silly, but he seemed grateful that someone had spoken to him. And I think there's a lot of loneliness out there. So if I can, initially when I put this together, I thought, right, I'm going to try and focus on maintaining people that can't maintain their gardens, who take pride in their gardens and want it to want to be able to sit there and look out and feel content, and maybe give them a bit of company as well at the same time. I'll see what happens on the back of this advert, but that would be my sort of ideal audience. But notwithstanding that, I've also applied to volunteer to drive elderly people around to their doctor's appointments and all that sort of stuff. I think for me, one of the things I'm passionate about is this loneliness, and the reason that because I live on my own, and that doesn't mean I'm on my own all the time. I'm not, but I sometimes do experience that sense of loneliness, and I think in our society, we don't look after our elderly particularly well. We tend to banish them to old people's homes and all the rest of it. And we are all getting older. So if I can give people a bit of company and what have you, then I think that's a good thing, because I've worked in a profession where at times you think, am I actually making a difference here? What difference am I really making to people? So I think it would be really satisfying to do something that does make a difference.
Yeah. I love that. I think you're doing two things, right? I wholeheartedly agree with the loneliness, because I've looked into this through the research, and there is a lot of research out there that now they reckon that loneliness could be one of the biggest killers of people over age 75. They think it's actually probably loneliness has a bigger detrimental effect than kind of like diabetes and stuff like that on people now.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
I think loneliness is, and it's one of those things that no one really talks about. I think it's crept up on us as a race of people over the last 10, 15, 20 years. Ironically, as the world becomes more connected, I think we become more lonely, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
And so I think you're doing two things. Number one, you're wonderfully giving back to people to help them not be lonely. In a lovely, wonderful, ironic twist, you're helping yourself not be lonely too, which I think just, if I can kind of give everyone a tip that's listening, like loneliness could be one of your biggest factors in retirement. Julian has kind of highlighted there that he does, he has a partner, he has a family, but he does live by himself. Just because you actually, even if you live with your spouse and you have family around you, doesn't mean that you're not going to be lonely, right? I mean, people can be lonely and surrounded by loads of people. So I think that's a really interesting thought process for people listening to kind of take forward. How can you help people not be lonely, and how can you help yourself not be lonely? That would be an amazing thing to do. Right, there's two things I want to touch on before we go. I've written down, I want to come back to spending money firstly, and then I'm going to ask you one final question thereafter. I loved your observation. I know it's early days, but I loved your observation around your natural decline in spending. And also you mentioned that you're kind of, there's a first generation of retirees now that are coming through in this new world. There's 15, 20 years maybe of data across, societies that have a retirement as part. So, you think about kind of South Africa, Australia, America over here in the UK. There's data out there now about spending patterns in retirement over a meaningful time period. And we've shared this before, and we've built it into your plans. All the evidence out there suggests that spending does decline. Lots of people think that their spending goes up, and maybe in kind of bulky situations, like you've got more time to go on a big trip or whatever that might look like from a bucket list perspective. But in general, spending does fall in real terms in retirement. And a lot of people experience a spending decline in some of the more core foundational elements of what they spend. Just briefly talk to me about that, because I don't think enough people understand what they're going to spend, what spending means, and what all the evidence suggests how your spending is going to go, and therefore completely overestimate how much they need and how much they're going to spend.
Yeah, as I said before, it is early days for me, but what I've experienced so far is perhaps more of a focus on cost of things, and just being a little bit more careful, because often we can spend money without thinking about it, without being able to account for what you've actually spent money on.
Yeah.
If you took £50 out and went out into town and came back, you probably wouldn't have £50 left, and you wouldn't have a bag with anything in it either.
No.
A couple of coffees. Exactly, a 30p carrier bag, and that's about it. So it has made me think, right, do I need this? Do I need to do this? Do I have to do this? Because before it was, well, it doesn't matter, I'll get paid again next month. There is that sort of fallback always.
Yeah.
And what I noticed this month, I actually underspent this month, not by a huge amount, but enough at least to pay for the new council wheelie bin for my green waste, which has annoyed me. Don't get me onto that one.
I've not done it. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to.
Well, see, as a gardener, I've got no choice, have I? I have to do it. So it's paid for that, and in a second bin sort of thing, but it just means I've got a little bit more time, maybe. And it sounds silly, but I've got a bit more time just to shop around a little bit. And I said to you last time we met, I said, when was the last time you sat down and looked at your phone contract, your TV contracts, your car insurance, your holiday insurance, and actually had time to go, right, I'm going to really have to spend a couple of hours trying to get the best deals, because we're all busy. And that getting that time back means that I have been able to maybe, be a bit more frugal and a bit more sensible.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's probably where it's come from.
But I think that is where I think a lot of it comes. A lot of people think their spending falls, or not falls. A lot of people think a spending fall will mean they spend, and this sounds a bit, I don't know how to word this, they spend less. They do spend less, but what they're doing is exactly what you're doing. Spending in retirement falls because people are more vigilant and diligent on what they spend their money on.
Yeah.
They have more time to go, well, actually, I'm not going to just auto-renew my car insurance. I'm not just going to auto-renew my thing. And so there's a more focus. It's not that they want to be frugal. It's just they're going, well, actually, I can now budget properly. I can now go, and so when that happens, I think it doesn't matter what age you are. No matter what age you are, if you sat down and went through this stuff all of the time, you'd absolutely save money. Your spending would go, because you'd sort out the deals. You'd be a bit more vigilant. I don't think people in retirement are as wasteful, and take that the right way, as people that are working, right? I'm not saying people are working just waste money, but as you said, without hesitation, you go and spend money because you know it's going to be replaced. So I think that, that looking inside yourself, and that is why spending in retirement drops, because people are just a bit more vigilant about stuff.
Well, that's right. And, it's funny enough, I was saying to my other half this morning, I said, she always used to sort of comment on how much food I'd throw away. So I'd go, because I was working, I'd do a weekly shop, come home in a week later, I'd throw half of it in the bin because I hadn't used it and it'd gone off. Now what I've noticed, I pretty much pop out every day and get what I need that day. So there's less waste. I've done things like buy a rail card to get a third off my rail travel. So it's £30 a year. I've already saved 20 quid. Again, sounds silly, but all those little things which I've never done before. So I'm learning. Like you say, just be a bit more vigilant about what you're spending. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, and I think it's a wonderful tip for people out there listening to do. It's like, don't be surprised that you're going to have more time to be a bit more vigilant about what you spend, and don't be surprised over 6 months, a year, 2 years that your spending falls. And we see this, right? Again, the data that we have collected suggests this as well. We ask you to create a spending plan every year, or at least update it and let us know what's going on. And typically that spending does fall, even within, like, in real terms, right? This is not saying that you don't have some sort of inflation adjustment, but in general, spending in retirement does not go up as much as inflation because you are more vigilant, you're renewing stuff cheaper, you're finding deals, you're doing all of that stuff. Because again, if you think about human nature, in a modern society, that makes us feel quite good.
Yeah.
So we are going to want to do that. And I encourage
Yeah.
everybody to kind of go and
Yeah,
take.
yeah, absolutely. I kind of wished I'd done it before to a degree. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not bad with budgeting, but there'll be things like, I don't know, saving money each month towards the cost of running my car. I've never actually done that before. When the insurance comes up, you go, oh, okay, but I'll pay that out and have it. But yesterday, I paid myself yesterday, and actually put money aside for the first time for my car. Silly things. So I know that won't keep me awake at night.
Amazing. So good. I love that. So I've got one last question for you, and this is in the spirit of giving back to people listening. So I want you to think about the last kind of 12 months. Think about everything we talked about, the fact you're out earlier, and it's still a journey, and everything that we have talked about. Can you give your top 3 bits? Again, the number's irrelevant. If it's one, great one, brilliant. But your top bits of advice or guidance for anyone thinking about retiring over the next 12 months. What would you say that people need to think about or do?
Yeah. I mean, we've covered some of this to a degree, but I would say commit. Okay. And what I mean by that is commit to the process, engage with a professional. You won't be alone then. Emotionally prepare yourself for it and spend as much time focusing on that as you would do making sure you've got enough money, etc. But do it with a professional. I can't stress it enough. The value of proper advice, that support, that accountability, that professionalism, knowing that someone's there, is invaluable. 100% would not be sat here retired now if it weren't for engaging with you, Dan. No way. So they would be my top 3 things.
Julian, thank you so much. And we've ended on a blowing a smoke piece, which we
Yes,
need to end
I
there.
know.
So thank you. I know, I'm joking. Julian, look, it's been amazing to work with you, and it's been so lovely for you to come on here and share your story and journey. I really can't thank you enough for kind of opening up and being vulnerable in this and sharing your story. I don't think you might do, because I think I'm going to get some feedback on this conversation from people that I will share with you, but I don't think you will truly understand the impact that this conversation will have on people listening. So I want you to thank you for that. And I can't wait to see what the next 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, etc. brings, right? As you come and cut my grass and you grow some veg for me and you come and do this. Actually, I'm not in your target market, right? So we won't worry about that.
You're not old enough, Dan. But
No.
maybe I can relax the rules a little bit. Listen, thanks for inviting me on as well. I really appreciate that. We don't talk about all of these things enough. So glad to be of some assistance, hopefully.
You absolutely have. So yeah, great. Awesome. Well, look, that just leaves me to thank everyone once again for listening in to the Humans versus Retirement podcast. Until next time, take care.